September 30th, 1955. A two-lane highway cutting through the California desert. A silver Porsche 550 Spyder screams toward an intersection at 90 miles per hour. Behind the wheel, the most electric young actor in America. 24 years old. 3 films to his name. Immortal already. But the car salesman who sold him that machine 3 weeks earlier had looked him dead in the eye and said one word: accursed. James Dean laughed it off. He shouldn't have. Because what happened next didn't just kill a legend, it started a chain of death that would claim 4 more lives. All of them connected to that twisted metal. All of them warned. None of them listened. Here is the story. Los Angeles, late summer 1955. The air smelled like jasmine and gasoline. Hollywood was in the middle of a revolution, and James Dean was the one holding the match. East of Eden had made him a star in the spring. Wrestle Without a Cause was about to explode into theaters, and A Giant, his third and final masterpiece, was wrapped and waiting. He was 24 years old, but he carried himself like someone who'd lived 3 lifetimes. The studio executives didn't know what to do with him. He didn't follow the rules, didn't smile for the cameras unless he meant it, didn't play the game, and he was obsessed with speed. Motorcycles, race cars, anything that could outrun the voices in his head. He'd grown up poor in Indiana, raised by an aunt and uncle after his mother died when he was 9. That kind of loss does something to a boy. It makes him reckless, makes him feel like he's got nothing to lose because the worst thing already happened. By September of 1955, Dean had become a regular at Competition Motors, a racing shop in Hollywood run by a man named George Barris. Barris was a legend in his own right, a custom car builder who worked with movie stars and daredevils. He'd seen plenty of young actors walk through his doors with too much money and too little sense. But Dean was different. He wasn't playing at being a racer. He was deadly serious. He'd already competed in a few amateur races, and he was good. Really good. Fast reflexes. No fear. The kind of driver who made other drivers nervous. So when Dean walked into Competition Motors on September 21st, 1955, looking to buy a race car, Barris didn't try to talk him out of it. He showed him the Porsche 550 Spyder, factory fresh, silver with red stripes, a machine built for one purpose, going faster than anything else on the road. The price tag was $7,000, a fortune in 1955. Dean didn't blink. He wrote the check on the spot. And that's when George Barris felt it. A cold knot in his stomach. He'd sold hundreds of cars in his career, but something about this one felt wrong. He looked at Dean, this kid with the whole world in front of him, and he almost said something. Almost, but business is business. And Dean was already in love with the car, running his hand along the hood like it was a woman. He'd even given it a nickname. Little Bastard. He had the name painted on the back in cursive letters. Barris handed over the keys, but before Dean walked out the door, Barris grabbed his arm. Just for a second, and he said something he'd never said to a customer before. Be careful with this one, Jimmy. I got a bad feeling about it. Dean just smiled, that crooked smile of his, and said, George, the only thing I'm worried about is not going fast enough. 9 days later, he'd be dead, and the curse would be just getting started. Section 3. The build-up and the struggle the week after Dean bought the Porsche was electric. He couldn't stay away from it. He'd drive it to the studio during the day, then take it out on the winding canyon roads at night, pushing it harder and harder, learning its limits, or maybe testing his own. His friends were worried. Alec Guinness, the British actor, ran into Dean at a restaurant on September 23rd, exactly 1 week before the crash. Dean was so excited about the Porsche that he dragged Guinness outside to see it. Guinness took one look at the car and felt his blood run cold. He later said he heard a voice in his head, clear as day, telling him that if Dean got in that car, he'd be dead within a week. He told Dean exactly that. Please, Guinness said, never get in that car. If you get in that car, you'll be found dead in it by this time next week. Dean laughed, thought it was a joke, but Guinness wasn't joking. He was dead serious, and the look on his face spooked Dean just enough that he got quiet for a moment. Then the moment passed, and Dean shrugged it off. But it wasn't just Guinness who felt something was wrong. Dean's mechanic, Rolf Wutherick, a German immigrant who'd been hired to keep the Porsche in racing condition, had a recurring nightmare that week. He dreamed of twisted metal and the smell of burning rubber. He dreamed of a two-lane highway and a car that came out of nowhere. He told Dean about the dream. Dean told him to stop being superstitious. Quick question. Have you ever had a gut feeling so strong you couldn't shake it, but you ignored it anyway because you didn't want to look like a fool? Let us know in the comments. By September 30th, Dean had entered the Porsche in a race scheduled for October 1st in Salinas, California, about 300 miles north of Los Angeles. The plan was simple. Drive the Porsche up to Salinas, get a feel for the car on the open road, and be fresh for the race the next day. The next day. Dean invited Wutherick to ride along as his mechanic. He also convinced his friend Bill Hickman, a stuntman, to follow behind in Dean's station wagon, towing an empty trailer just in case the Porsche had any mechanical issues. Warner Brothers, the studio that had Dean under contract, heard about the plan and tried to stop him. They had a strict policy against their actors doing dangerous activities. Racing a car at 100 miles per hour definitely qualified. But Dean didn't care. He'd already made up his mind. On the morning of September 30th, Dean and Wutherick climbed into the Porsche. The sun was bright. The sky was clear. Perfect driving weather. They left Los Angeles around 1:30 in the afternoon. For the first 2 hours, everything was fine. Dean was in heaven, the wind in his face, the engine screaming beneath him. He even got pulled over for speeding near Bakersfield. The cop clocked him at 65 in a 55 zone and gave him a ticket. Dean took the ticket with a grin and promised to slow down. He didn't. By 5:45 p.m. They were approaching the town of Cholum, a tiny speck on the map where two highways intersected. Route 466 and Route 41, a flat, empty stretch of road where you could see for miles in every direction. Dean was flying. The Porsche was doing 90 miles per hour, maybe more. And then, up ahead, a black and white Ford sedan appeared, heading in the opposite direction. The driver of the Ford, a 23-year-old college student named Donald Turnipseed, needed to make a left turn across Dean's lane to get onto Route 41. He looked. He didn't see the Porsche. It was small, it was low to the ground, and it was moving so fast it didn't register. Turnipseed started his turn. Rolf Wutherick saw it first. The black and white Ford cutting directly across their path. No warning, no time to react. He screamed, "Jimmy, he's turning! He's turning!" Dean saw it half a second later. His hands jerked the wheel to the right, trying to swerve around the Ford, but there wasn't enough road. There wasn't enough time. The Porsche was too fast and the Ford was already in the intersection. The sound was ungodly. Metal tearing through metal, tearing through metal. Glass exploding, the high-pitched shriek of brakes that couldn't stop what was already in motion. The Porsche hit the Ford's passenger side at nearly 90 miles per hour. The impact folded the little silver car in half. The engine was ripped out and thrown 20 feet. The driver's side door crumpled inward like paper. Wutherick was ejected from the car. His body flew through the air and landed 30 feet away in the dirt, his jaw shattered, his legs broken, barely conscious. But James Dean never left the car. His body was pinned behind the wheel, crushed by the force of the impact. His neck was broken. His chest was caved in. They say he died instantly, but no one really knows. All we know is that when the first witnesses arrived at the scene, less than a minute after the crash, he was already gone. One of those witnesses was a local man who'd been driving behind Turnipseed. He ran to the Porsche, looked inside, and saw Dean's face. His eyes were still open. His lips were slightly parted, like he was about to say something. The man later said he'd never forget that look. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was confusion. Like Dean couldn't understand how it had ended this way. Bill Hickman, who'd been following Dean in the station wagon, arrived moments later. He jumped out of the car and sprinted to the wreckage. He looked at Dean's body. His friend, the man he'd worked with, laughed with, and he collapsed to his knees. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, just knelt there in the dirt, staring at the twisted metal that used to be a race car. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, but there was nothing they could do. They pronounced James Dean dead at the scene. He was 24 years old. Donald Turnipseed, the driver of the Ford, walked away with minor injuries, a few cuts, a bruised face. That was it. But he was never charged with a crime. The investigation concluded it was an accident, poor visibility. Bad timing, a tragedy, but no one's fault. But here's the thing. The story should have ended there. A young actor driving too fast died in a crash. It happens. It's horrible, but it happened. Except the Porsche didn't die with him. The wreckage, the twisted, mangled remains of a little bastard, was towed to a garage in Sholem. And that's when the curse really started. George Barris, the man who'd sold Dean the car, bought the wreckage back for $500. He couldn't explain why. He just felt like he needed to. When the wreckage arrived at his shop, two of his mechanics were tasked with unloading it from the trailer. One of them, a man named Troy McHenry, slipped while pulling the chassis off the truck. The wreckage fell on him, crushing both of his legs. He spent 6 weeks in the hospital. But that was just the beginning. Barris decided to strip the Porsche for parts. The engine was still intact. So was the transmission. He sold the engine to a local doctor named William Eschred, who wanted to install it in his own race car. He sold the transmission to another racer, a man named Troy McHenry. Yes, the same man who'd been injured unloading the wreckage. Both men entered a race in Pomona, California, in October 1956, exactly 1 year after Dean's death. During the race, Eschred's car, by Dean's engine, spun out of control and slammed into a tree. Eschred was killed instantly. At the exact same moment, on the other side of the track, McHenry's car, with Dean's transmission, flipped over and skidded into a barrier. McHenry was thrown from the car and died before the ambulance arrived. 2 men, 2 deaths, both tied to pieces of the cursed Porsche. But it still wasn't over. George Barris was terrified. He'd seen enough. Didn't want anything to do with the Porsche anymore, but he couldn't bring himself to destroy it. Instead, he did something strange. He turned it into a touring exhibit. He welded the wreckage back together, barely, and started loaning it out to highway safety organizations. The idea was to use Dean's death as a cautionary tale, a way to scare teenagers into driving safely. The wreckage was displayed at high schools, shopping malls, car shows. Thousands of people came to see it, to touch it, to stand next to the car that killed James Dean. And the curse followed it everywhere. In 1959, the wreckage was being displayed in Sacramento. It was mounted on a rotating platform held in place by steel cables. During the exhibit, one of the cables snapped. The wreckage fell off the platform and landed on a teenager who'd been standing too close. The impact shattered his hip. He spent the rest of his life walking with a cane. In 1960, the wreckage was being transported to a show in Miami. The truck carrying it lost control on a highway and crashed. The driver was killed. The Porsche somehow was barely damaged. By 1960, Barris had seen enough. He wanted the car gone. He arranged for it to be shipped to Los Angeles for one final display, and then he planned to have it destroyed. But the Porsche had other plans. On the way to Los Angeles, the truck carrying the wreckage disappeared. No one knows what happened. The truck was there one moment and gone the next. The driver was never found. The wreckage was never recovered. To this day, no one knows where the remains of James Dean's Porsche are. Some people think it was stolen. Others think Barris had it secretly destroyed and lied about it to keep the legend alive. But there's another theory. Some people believe the car simply vanished, that whatever dark energy had attached itself to that machine finally consumed it completely. George Barris never spoke publicly about what he really thought happened, but in a private interview years later, he said something chilling. "I think the car wanted to disappear. I think it knew it had done enough damage. 4 people dead, a dozen more injured. All of them connected to a single machine. And all of it started the moment James Dean put his hands on the wheel. James Dean lived fast and he died young. That's the story everyone knows. The rebel. The icon. The kid who burned so bright he couldn't help but burn out. But the truth is more complicated than that. Dean wasn't reckless because he didn't care. He was reckless because he cared too much. He felt everything, every emotion, every injustice, every moment with an intensity that most people can't understand, and that intensity needed an outlet. For some people, it's art. For Dean, it was speed. He wasn't trying to die. He was trying to feel alive. But the Porsche, that's a different story. Maybe it was cursed. Maybe it was just bad luck compounded by human error. Maybe the curse was nothing more than people looking for meaning in tragedy, trying to make sense of something that can never make sense. But here's what we know for sure. George Barris warned him. Alec Guinness warned him. His own mechanic had nightmares about it. And Dean got in the car anyway, because that was who he was. A man who didn't believe in limits. A man who thought he was untouchable, until he wasn't. The legend of James Dean didn't die on that highway. If anything, it was born there. His death turned him into something bigger than any actor could ever be. He became a symbol of youth, of rebellion, of the price we pay for living without fear. But the curse of a little bastard, that's a different kind of legend, a darker one, a reminder that some things in this world carry weight we can't see, and that sometimes the warnings we ignore are the ones that matter most. So here's the question, do you believe in curses? Or do you think we create our own fate, one choice at a time? Let us know in the comments, and unfortunately they don't make men like James Dean anymore.